Their hope, I think, is to build a lot of depth in the system, hope that a couple of guys pop, and that they have the pitching to sort of push them into a competitive window.
Let's learn about the top prospect in the Miami Marlins organization provided by Baseball America. It's called a prospect profile. I'm Scott Braun, along with Baseball America's JJ Cooper and Geoff Pontes. So, JJ, tell me about Thomas White, and do you think he's the next big thing in Miami on a mound?
Yes, I think he's absolutely the next big thing, and he is kind of pretty big too, as you see on the photo there. Like, this is a guy who's pretty well built already. Coming into 2024, it was like, okay, Thomas White, Noble Meyer, the two best pitching prospects in the Marlins system. At this point, here we are in 25, and I would say that it's pretty clear that Thomas White looks like the best pitching prospect in the Marlins system. He was considered arguably the best lefty pitching prospect in the 23 class. You can look at where he was picked and say, really, it was just because of asking price. This is the guy who kind of showed what he could do in high school and then has only gotten better since then. Geoff, when you look at Thomas White, the pitcher, what is it that makes him the clear-cut number one for the Marlins?
Yeah, I think when you just look at the quality of stuff, of course, what the performance was, throughout the season, White outperformed Meyer. But I think when you look at the fastball quality, that was one of the things about Noble Meyer that was sort of questionable. And White, I actually was sort of pleasantly surprised. The numbers overall in terms of, induced vertical break, HB, all that sort of stuff, just how the fastball moves is really good. It's almost Cole Reagans-esque in terms of the amount of ride and run that he gets on it with power. And there was, secondaries, which were kind of the question coming out of high school here in Massachusetts, was, how good is his breaking ball going to get? Can he show a quality changeup that he can land for strikes, consistently? I think that he answered a lot of those questions. He added a slider this year as well, kind of changed the shape of his breaking ball a little bit. So it's an interesting pitch mix. Now he kind of has like a 3 to 4 pitch mix where all those pitches kind of move in different directions and have quality. And, he's shown the ability to land them consistently in the zone. So I think when you look at all those ingredients, you look at how young he is, as JJ said at the top of the show, his build and just how physical he already is. And there's probably even some good strength projection left. I think it's almost no question in terms of who should be the number one pitching prospect in that Marlins system.
The thing that you can't help but kind of think of is if someone's trying to say like, okay, I've never seen him pitch, what should I be thinking of here? Think Blake Snell, who was a top high school, pitching prospect in the Rays system now many years ago. Was our player of the year now many years ago, also at Baseball America. But when you look at White, like the strengths and the weaknesses, the strengths are it's really impressive stuff from the left side. If there is a weakness right now, it's the walk rate, it's the control. But sometimes with his control, kind of like Blake Snell's, it's a little bit about getting strikeouts. It's a little bit about nibbling. It doesn't feel like it's like he just has no clue of where the strike zone is. It's more of kind of the way he pitches right now. And so you could make the argument, what he's going to have to really do, his remaining to-do list is he's just got to get a lot better at throwing strikes consistently. Or then you could also look at it and say, it's going to be hard he'll keep working on that, but this is working for him pretty well right now. And with that being the case, it's kind of, it's something you would love to see him take a step forward with. But if it doesn't even improve dramatically, we have seen Blake Snell kind of show you can have success with this kind of stuff with that kind of approach. And this was kind of something that was also true of Blake Snell as he was kind of coming up through the minors as well. We saw sometimes control got better, but we've also seen at times where it kind of wavered a little bit as well. Thomas White, again, he's really young. So this is also his to-do list as he's really kind of hitting his 20s. So he's probably going to hit AA before he turns 21 this year, which is pretty remarkable and really just kind of just spells out what an intriguing and interesting pitching prospect he is.
The one thing I noticed sometimes with Snell lately, JJ, is how he doesn't want to give in. And if you choose that and you're super stubborn, you are going to walk some guys. So I'm wondering, if Thomas White does eventually take that route, how that plays out. Sometimes there's the balance of control versus just getting a little bit more aggressive and trusting your stuff, right?
Yeah, but I was going to say, if it pays off in multiple Cy Youngs, I think you say thumbs up. Let's just do that 1,000 times out of 1,000.
Agreed. All right. Was there anyone else in consideration for a spot like this? Thomas White is, I would say, a lesser known name than most of these number ones that we're going to come across.
I will say he's one of the names who you will be hearing a lot more of this year. I wouldn't be shocked if he's one of the best pitching prospects in baseball at some point this year. We kind of have that group of guys who are really knocking on the door of the big leagues, that guys like Jackson Jobe, who really he's already reached the big leagues. Thomas White's part of that next wave. The stuff here is really, really impressive. I would say that Geoff mentioned Noble Meyer. Noble Meyer was the other guy who's in consideration. It just really, White kind of took that step forward this year. But if you look at this Marlins system, which I just got to be honest, is not in as great a shape as you would want for a team who's in an utter rebuild. With all of that, they have a lot of intriguing prospects, but there really wasn't anyone else you would say, okay, is that player kind of making an argument against White for number one? There are a lot of prospects in this Marlins system, I would say now, that have plausible paths to big league careers, but we're going to have to see how many of them are regulars. And that's something that is really not a question with Thomas White. Thomas White is 100% a plug him into your rotation as long as he stays healthy. Down the road, plug him in the rotation. Right now, when we talk about it, he's so young. There's a part of me that thinks, you could be talking about by the end of the year or by 2026. At the same time, young pitching prospects often will hit a hiccup or two. You don't want to go overboard with that, because a guy like Andrew Painter, if we were talking about Andrew Painter a couple of years ago, we just said, man, he's just knocking on the door. Then Tommy John arrives, and all of a sudden it's a couple of years later and we're still waiting for him to kick that door in. So there's always the durability risk. There's always, you could hit that AA, AAA setback where you have to make a few adjustments. But you look at this all together and you say, Thomas White should eventually be at or near the front of the Marlins rotation.
And Geoff, the Marlins are a window team. And what I mean is they're never going to have, a 10, 15-year run where they're just good every year under this ownership group or the previous ones that we've seen, right? We've seen the skit for a long time. So I just think it's important that they actually time out how everyone is peaking, if that makes sense. Make sure that you've got guys all kind of coming up at the same time and able to be good around the same time, because I felt like they just mistimed the last run.
Yeah, I think, it's important for teams like this where, there's not a fan base that I think is clamoring for victories and, consistent winning teams. That's obviously not something that's been part of the Marlins history, even when they did have winning teams, for that matter. And the ownership, regardless of whether it was the older ownership group or the new ownership group, just hasn't sort of invested that way. They brought in Peter Bendix, from the Rays. I think they're trying to sort of copy that model. Seems like there's a lot of multi-position guys that are coming in, a lot of guys that are good hit tool, sort of on base ability guys, and then build around pitching. So their hope, I think, is to build a lot of depth in the system, hope that a couple of guys pop, and that they have the pitching to sort of push them into a competitive window and then supplement as needed with, maybe cheap older free agents or something like that. That kind of seems like the direction of where they'd like to head. Whether they get there or not is another question. They certainly need to add more talent. They did do a good job of adding some talented players, though flawed, at last year's trade deadline. There's maybe more impact and power in the system than there's been in a while. And they've done a good job over the years, regardless of what the major league team has been like in terms of developing pitching and getting homegrown, or at least players that they acquired who debut with them, up to the major leagues and getting them a little bit better.
So Thomas White is the name to know for Marlins fans and for prospect fans in general. He's number one on Baseball America's list for the Marlins. We do these every single day during spring training, so swing back for another one tomorrow. Or if you need to get caught up on others, then you can do so now. And please hit the subscribe button here on the Baseball America YouTube channel, or if you're listening on a podcast platform.